Identity is negotiated, plain and simple, not subjectively defined. For all of those who have matured past the level of an egocentric and sometimes violent 2-year-old. And yet our society is increasingly predicated upon the insistence that such egocentric definition of identity must be accepted at face value, with all exceptions to that acceptance punishable by law. There is nothing good about this for anyone. The adolescents who insist that their identity be subjectively defined and who simultaneously toy with a fluid self-description, even at the level of basic sex, to say nothing of gender or sexual attraction, appear fixated at the 2-year-old level of development. They are ensconced in a subjective, solipsistic world of pretense, which operates independently of the concerns of all others. They insist, with all the egocentricity of a 2-year-old, that their opinion about their identity, regardless of whether that identity constitutes a playable social game voluntarily acceptable to others, is to be regarded as paramount, with all violations marked by what is essentially a temper tantrum, and with all violators, regardless of intent, another characteristic of 2-year-old thought, to be punished as perpetrators. Why might this be?
Number 1, trans ideology is a social contagion. Schools encourage it. Parents go along with it. The culture and media celebrate it. I mean, you gotta be 18 to get a tattoo, 21 to drink, 16 to get a license because you're too young and dumb to make such permanent and dangerous decisions. But if you want to change your pronouns, get top surgery, take hormones that will do irreversible permanent damage to your body without your parents' knowledge or consent, then it's celebrated. That is our culture's logic today, folks. Kids don't avoid risky behaviors that their peers approve of. They embrace and adopt them. There is a social incentive to identify with an oppressed group, to identify as a victim. Suddenly, you're brave. You have a voice, and nobody can question it. Over 90% of these girls who suddenly identify in the LGBTQ crowd are white. You're an oppressor. Suddenly, you went from oppressor to oppressed by identifying as a minority group. Kids feel like they suddenly have power that cannot be taken away from them. Now, I can personally attest to this in my own state, that many kids in middle and high schools are supposedly under the LGBTQ umbrella. My oldest is 12, and I can see this stuff in her peer group. I live in New Mexico, a state that is very progressive with this kind of stuff. Many girls identify as being part of this group. It's not cool to be cisgender. This is trendy. It doesn't matter if they actually are trans, bi, or non-binary, or whatever. They have to be under the umbrella in some way because they're now a part of a tribe, a group that they feel connected to.
Can we give them names, Pa?
Sure, I think we should, seeing as they're part of the family now.
I want to call this one Patty.
Patty it is.
Better name this one Pat. He's a boy. Laura.
Well, the child would be in a heap of trouble if she didn't know the difference between boys and girls.
Really, Charles?
Pat and Patty it is. Everybody up and away.
The cultural forces that desire to tear down the Christian religion and the sacredness of the family have made it very clear that one of the ways that they are seeking to do this is to introduce sexuality and sexual content to younger and younger children. And the conservative political response has been to say, that's not what we want and that's inappropriate, which is true from the standpoint of what schools and things like that should be teaching our kids. But I think that Jordan Peterson made a good point in his video about identity when he criticized overprotective helicopter parents.
Children are now being born to adults who are old enough by historical standards to be grandparents. Such adults are likely to be more conservative and sheltering than younger parents. They are also possessed of the resources that make optimal deprivation for their children difficult. If your family is wealthy, why not shield your children from all threat and pain, but therefore also from all necessary challenge? If your family is wealthy, why not give in to every material request and fulfill every whim, particularly if accompanied by an unpleasant emotional outburst, easily, if only temporarily, quelled by parental submission? Second, children are increasingly likely to be only children. And it is highly probable that much of the basic narcissism of the 2-year-old, developmentally appropriate at 2 but not thereafter, is negotiated or even pounded out by siblings who tend to be very intolerant of excess self-absorption and attention-seeking.
When that child encounters the culture, the world at large, or encounters things unbeknownst to their parents in the presence of phones and other online services, they will be exposed to this, and it will be in the form of toxic, predatory sources. And I think that this is an area where, in one sense, the Christian needs to take the statements of the leftist types and use it for our advantage, because they insist that children need to learn about things like gender and sexuality from an earlier and earlier age. And I would say, in a sense, that is true. And they criticize the conservative viewpoint by making a mockery of bills such as the one in Florida, which they call a "Don't Say Gay" bill, and saying that conservatives just want to repress information. It's the same sort of criticism that they used. It's always to make the Christian and the conservative-minded person look like a fool, to look unintelligent, to criticize their beliefs as backward and antiquated, by saying that it's "don't say gay," which it never says. But I would say, don't say gay. Christians should not say gay, because gay is a colloquialism, and instead they should say homosexual. And in regards to homosexuality, they should also be contrasting it by teaching their children about heterosexuality.
Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
Thanks for the tip.
When is the right time to teach your children about penises and vaginas? It's from the age when they're old enough to say, "What is this?" and understand that they have either one or the other, and that only one belongs to boys and only one belongs to girls. And this is something that a lot of psychologists and people have known for a long time, that properly teaching your children about things like, what their body parts are and what they are for, and specifically that they are made for the purpose and function of reproduction, will in fact protect them from predatory behavior. Because predators who are trying to groom children to see if they are a good target will gauge the child's knowledge or ignorance of such things. And they're not comfortable with a kid that refers to his penis as a penis. They want to call it some cutesy name. And if the child goes along with it, then that signals to that person that this child is someone that can be taken advantage of. And these people are pathetic enough that simply realizing that a small child knows the correct terms for their anatomy makes them too intimidating of a subject to try to harm them. So if that is the knowledge that is necessary in that regard, we really need to be exposing our children to it. Now, we need to be cautious of how we do this. And in this sense, as a science teacher, I found that you can present the factual information in a way that the children can understand, that does not produce the snickers and the giggles and the jokes. But at the core of that, it must be presented first and foremost as having a purpose. And the first purpose is reproduction. And children understand this because children desire to emulate the roles of their parents. They don't know what happens between mothers and fathers behind closed doors, but they see mothers and fathers as nurturers, caretakers. And that's why children of both sexes will play with baby dolls. Girls prefer it, but boys are not, don't hate it. They pretend to be mommies and daddies. They understand that children desire to have younger siblings. They desire to be like their parents, and they innately see rearing children as a good thing, because how could they not? How could they come to the concept of having a child as a negative thing without concluding that there's something wrong with them? And so that is the first purpose and function that parents need to teach their children in regard to these things. And then as they get older, you can teach them about why sex is pleasurable and why it is designed to create a bond of affection between a mother and father to keep them united, and why a faithful monogamous relationship is the best form of reproductive union. And these are really not hard things for kids to grasp, but we need to be willing to expose our children, inoculate them from the bad teaching by teaching them the true purpose. Because once the forbidden and mysterious nature is removed from sex and sexuality, which is still there, in the sense of we should protect them from images of sexual depiction. You should protect your children from viewing pornography or seeing pictures of naked people. But, books with drawings and things like that help them understand their purpose in the world and the difference between boys and girls. These are things that parents knew children needed to know for thousands of years. And somehow we've kind of gotten into this thing of childhood is for cuteness, and then when they get older, we introduce them to these adult matters. But that's not wisdom. And I believe that we are seeing the negative consequences of a failure to equip children properly in this area. Because if you don't teach your kids about this stuff, they will learn about it from pornography, from their friends who are watching pornography, or from predatory individuals who are seeking to take advantage of them.
Why I decided to pull both of my kids out of school and homeschool them. Part of my goal in doing this is not to keep them from it, actually. Some might be surprised that I will say this, but I want to expose them to it. I want to have all the talks in the world about this. Give it to me. Let's talk about this. Put it all out on the table. I want to expose them to this cultural trend and more, not just this. There's a lot more things that we talk about and will discuss other than this. But I want to talk about cultural trends and everything in a place where they're allowed to ask questions without the pressure of conforming to it. Hence, they not be labeled intolerant or a bully. Parents out there who are having to deal with this in your schools, I join hands and hearts with you in praying for your kids. My advice is to not shelter them from this. It's here. And if we do not teach them about this and inoculate them from it, then someone else will. This is kind of what happens with kids who don't know about how to defend their faith and then they go off to college. They don't know how to handle those things. They don't know how to handle the questions being asked to them. Let them ask questions and hold on to truth. Hold on to reality. You do not need to go out and buy this book and read it, but we do need to know about this. I will say, of course, that it is beneficial to read this book as well as Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality. That's a great book as well to help armor up against this stuff.
So, why is this a relevant thought to my mind right now? Well, for one thing, I do have 2 daughters that I want to protect, but I don't want them to be naive, and I don't want them to be lured by false promises. And secondly, I just want them to realize that having children is good, and it's a really good thing. It's the best thing that can happen to you. And because of that, my wife and I have decided, we decided, we are having another child. And so it's especially meaningful.